Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Landis, we are attempting to undertake something that is a little bit crazy. It's taken a lot of time to prepare for this, but we're excited about it. We are previewing and picking every game involving one of our northern teams. We have 28 northern teams on Kings of the North that we talk about, that we focus on. Only two of those teams are playing each other, West Virginia and Penn State. And then we threw in a group of 5 game. We found like a group of 5 northern team we wanted to talk about. So that means we have 27 games to pick quickly, and then we're going to do a big game breakdown each week on this Thursday show here on Kings of the North with Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. And this week, our big game breakdown is going to be Penn State and West Virginia. That's a lot of picks.
It's one might say it's too many picks. We'll find out, I guess. Yeah, it was. Listen, like preview, yes, but some of these games are going to be out of hand, I think, rather quickly. So the previews will be breezy.
Yeah.
But we are picking every game. I think that's the most important part. We are going on the record with a score prediction for every single game involving each of our 28 teams.
We are coming at this from a football standpoint, not a gambling standpoint. Most of the time, we may mention what the spread is in the game. It's just to provide you some context. We have a separate gambling show that will drop every Friday morning during the season with me and Tyler Shoemaker, who is an actual gambling expert, and we will give you best bets. We are betting actual $500 to $600 of our own company money each week on that show. We're going to give it to charity at the end of the year, but we're putting our money where our mouth is there. But you and I are not gambling experts, so we want to divide that up with our content. If you want to talk about gambling, we have a show for you. If you want to talk about just ball, this is the ball pick show. Yes, context of point spreads, but you and I are not picking against the spread. We're giving score picks, but we're just talking ball, brother.
We are just talking ball. No one wants gambling advice from me. I promise you that. Get it from Tyler Shoemaker, because that guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, Friday morning. Catch that on Bets of the North. All right, are you ready to do this? What we're going to do, we're going to run through the early games. We have, let me double check here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Thursday night games involving northern teams, 2 Friday games involving northern teams, and then we have a big Saturday slate. We actually have a Monday game, Boston College at Florida State. We're going to do the Thursday and Friday games first quickly. Then we'll do our big game breakdown with Penn State and West Virginia, and then we'll get to the Saturday games. Are you ready to go, Bill Landis?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. First up is Howard at Rutgers. Rutgers is favored by about 37 points. Of note, Howard was picked to finish second in the MEAC, and Howard only lost to Northwestern by a field goal last year. It does feel like, Landis, that Greg Schiano is aware that there are some expectations for Rutgers this year. He talked about this week that he's spoken to his team about that. He also acknowledged the loss of Mohamed Touré is one of those things that kind of throws a monkey wrench into their season already. I'm curious to see what they look like with Ethan Kaliak-Manis chucking the ball around, man.
Yeah, so am I. There's some injury stuff beyond Mohamed Touré, it sounds like, with Rutgers. Greg Schiano was talking about maybe some offensive line stuff they may have to work through in this game. I believe it's still unclear, actually, whether or not even Tyreen Powell, the other linebacker who was coming off an Achilles injury, will play in this game, or maybe he'll be limited in some way. So Rutgers has some stuff it's working through, but they've handled business in games like this since Greg Schiano has been back there. So it's not anything I'm worried about. I still have Rutgers winning quite handily, even though Howard, it's not a bad MEAC team.
Rutgers beat Wagner the last 2 years. I think the most similar game to this, 66-7 and 52-3.
Yeah.
So I am 48-10 on this game.
Yeah. What am I, 41-10? Yeah.
So the other thing to note here is we potentially are terrible at doing this job, which is hosting a college football show, because our producer Mike and I ran through all the picks before the show. The number of times where you and I have at least one of the scores the same in the game picks, I am going to track it. It is mind-blowing. We basically only need one of us. We could just kick the other person off this show. We need to become fake heels. We need to Skip Bayless this thing. We need to start saying things we don't believe because we analyze football too similarly.
Well, part of it too is it's week 1 slate, right? I think as we get more competitive matchups, we will have some differences of opinion. Although I guess there are a couple toss-up games, so I'll be curious where we land on those few toss-up games. But yeah, if I need to start making stuff up, I'll make it up. It's fine. I'm comfortable swimming in those waters. Yeah, I can do that.
Thanks, man. Thanks for being willing to be a fraudulent college football clickbait huckster.
Yeah, no problem.
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. All right. So this is one of those we both picked Howard to score 10. All right. Next
Yeah.
game up, Bill.
It is Lindenwood at Kansas, also on Thursday night. Lindenwood, this is their first game against an FBS opponent.
Yeah.
Since moving up to this level, or moving up to Division I, excuse me, 2 years ago. And I got to be honest, I got nothing else really for you on this one. It's being played in Kansas City at the soccer stadium.
Yep.
Kansas is favored by about 43, 44 points. That people are expecting this to be a blowout, possibly a game even where Lindenwood doesn't get any points on the board. It's kind of all about Kansas and what we see from Jalen Daniels and Devin Neal and this offense, I think, which could have a pretty fun, easy opener to start the season.
Yeah, I think Kansas puts people on notice here. They're not afraid to win big. They beat Tennessee Tech 56-10 last year. They have 30 seniors. Devin Neal needs 765 rushing yards to break the school's all-time rushing record. I don't think he'll get that in this game.
Probably not.
They have 3 receivers back. If Jalen Daniels stays healthy, this is going to be like a super exciting team to watch. But I think they come out and get after it. This is Lindenwood's first ever game against an FBS team. Yeah. So they've never been here. This is like totally new to them. And I think that's like a really tough spot. So I really think Kansas handles business. I've got 56-3.
Yeah, I've got 49-3, and a shutout I think is certainly on the table for the Jayhawks.
And we both have 3. Okay, next game is North Carolina at Minnesota. Minnesota started out as a favorite. They have a couple injury questions. They're now about a field goal underdog at home in this game. North Carolina won this matchup 31-13. Last year when they played, that was when North Carolina had Drake May. We had Ryan Burns on the show on Tuesday. I thought he gave a really good breakdown of this game. And what Ryan Burns said, who knows Minnesota football, Bill, as well as anybody, is that both Darius Taylor, the running back, and Daniel Jackson, the receiver, 2 of the best skill guys in the Big Ten, are at that. We're not sure exactly what's going to happen with them from an injury standpoint. Ryan thought if at least one played, Minnesota had a shot. This is a very difficult thing to try to analyze. I think I agree with that. They need at least one because, man, that's a tough way. They got Max Brosmer as a 6th-year quarterback, first year at Minnesota, ready to chuckle it all over the place. But you got to have at least one of your dudes to hang your offense on. That's a tough spot for Minnesota to be uncertain with their 2 best offensive skill players.
Yeah, without both, I do think it gets a little tricky. And that, I guess the line movement suggests maybe one of them will not be playing. This has the potential to be a matchup of 2 of the best running backs in the country with Darius Taylor at Minnesota and Omarion Hampton at UNC. Obviously, if Darius Taylor doesn't play, that's a problem for Minnesota. But actually, they've done a nice job building up the depth, like via the transfer portal at running back. So like they have Marcus Major from Oklahoma. They got C.A. Bangura from Ohio. Like those are 2 pretty productive backs, especially Bangura, like 2,000 rushing yards at Ohio. So like if Darius Taylor can't play, still got a decent offensive line, still got some decent running backs. Like and there's a lot of transition at UNC. I could envision Minnesota having success running the ball kind of either way.
Okay.
More success, obviously, if Darius Taylor plays, but I think Minnesota could be okay even if he doesn't play tonight.
4 or 5 starters back on the offensive line, including one of the best tackles in the country. I think Max Brosmer has a chance to come out and light it up right away. Tanner Morgan, like the last really good Minnesota quarterback, when he made his first start in October of 2018, he threw for more than 300 yards. And I also like Minnesota on a Thursday.
Yep.
They beat Nebraska to open last year on a Thursday. They beat New Mexico State the year before to open on a Thursday. And in 2021, at home against Ohio State on a Thursday in the first ever start for CJ Stroud, they were right there. They led at the half, and they were up 21-17 in the third quarter on Ohio State. And it took a 56-yard touchdown from CJ Stroud to Garrett Wilson. Those are 2 NFL guys to give Ohio State a lead. So Minnesota on a Thursday, Gophers win. I've got it 27-22 Minnesota.
Yeah, don't underestimate the power of the Minnesota State Fair. All right. I got 24-21 Gophers. I think Minnesota has a better quarterback in this game, and I think Minnesota's probably better in the trenches in this game. And Drake May is not playing. So yeah, give me Minnesota.
All right. Next game. What do you got, Bill?
Oh, it's another big one. It's North Dakota State at Colorado. imagine there'll be quite a few eyeballs on this one.
Yeah.
I know you had some discussion earlier this week about this game, about North Dakota State in particular.
Yep.
Noteworthy that the Bison have some injury concerns,
Yeah,
not the least of
for
which
sure.
is Cole Wisniewski, their All-American safety, who is, I think, definitively their best player, will not play in this game. So it is a North Dakota State secondary
Yeah.
against a Colorado quarterback and receiver core that we know is good. That could be a tough time for the Bison. It's like around a touchdown, I think. I think at a time it was a little bigger than that. But I saw it around a touchdown
I
last
think
I looked.
it might be creeping towards 10. Might be
Is it?
creeping towards 10 for
Oh,
Colorado.
really?
9.5, 10. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it came down. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. It went up. My apologies. It went up. Yeah, it was touchdown. It went up. It's all about, for me, like what Colorado looks like up front. I think whatever you think of perceived talent advantages between FBS teams or FCS teams, like North Dakota State is a physical team that is going to bring it up front and try to establish something there. So this is a good test for what Colorado tried to do in the transfer portal on both the offensive line and the defensive line.
North Dakota State's going to be physical, and it's whether Colorado can handle it. As Jeff Kolpak, who knows North Dakota State better than anybody, told us, North Dakota State wins these games. They often get down early. They give up some stuff in the passing game, and then they wear you down. So can North Dakota State wear down Colorado on both sides of the ball? 2 years ago, North Dakota State has a great history of winning these games. 2 years ago, they lost to Arizona. That was with Jaden DeLaura, who's like kind of a big-time quarterback, playing quarterback for Arizona. Arizona won that game 31-28. Arizona had a 229 to 124 edge in passing yards, but North Dakota State had a 283 to 165 edge in rushing yards in a 3-point game. I think it could be something like that. As long as North Dakota State can prevent Shedeur Sanders from throwing for 350, I think they're right there. I've been talking about it too much. The injuries scare me, but I'm still going to take North Dakota State. I've got the Bison 26-24.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Colorado State's offensive line, the reworked offensive line, will have a pretty good showing here. I think Shedeur Sanders will have time. I don't know if the secondary can hang with what Colorado is going to throw out there at receiver. So I got Colorado 31-17. Maybe it's a little tight early, but I think Colorado's skill at QB and receiver is going to be too much.
All right, little disagreement. That's good for us. Yeah. All right, next game is Eastern Illinois at Illinois. Illinois, a 4-touchdown favorite in this one. Illinois has never lost to an FCS team. Eastern Illinois has never beaten a Big Ten team, and the average margin of victory for Illinois in these FCS games is about 30 points. Illinois was terrible turning the ball over last year. They just got to hold on to it a little bit. I think Illinois should be able to handle themselves in this. I'm not super high on Illinois this year, and if they have any trouble with this one, then it's absolutely red flag territory.
Yeah, I think that's right. Eastern Illinois, not a bad FCS team, a team that's receiving votes in the FCS coaches poll. But Illinois should control this game. Like I want to see some physicality from Illinois' offensive line. I want to see them run the ball efficiently and explosively. Yeah. I think they probably will. So I have Illinois winning 38-13. I don't think it's like an overwhelming, let's put up a 60-point kind of effort from Illinois, but I think a team that has offensive limitations still gets close to 40 and gets a nice one in their opener.
And I have 31-13. So yet another score that is too close to be interesting. All right, next one, Bill, what do you got?
You have Southern Utah at Utah. This has a chance to, I think, get kind of ugly. The last time these teams played, Utah scored 38 points in the second quarter and won 73-7. I didn't go that big with my score prediction, but I do think something like that is on the table because I could see Utah with Cam Rising back with some exciting weapons at receiver, just wanting to like really put this offense on display of what it can be. So it could be the runaway of all runaway. This might be maybe the most lopsided game we have this week. We'll see. I have it at 55-14 Utah.
And I have it at 55-10 because we are the same person. 38-point spread there. This game 2 years ago, they played each other. Utah won 73-7. So they might lay it on here. Can I give you an interesting Utah fact as Utah gets to play its first game as a member of the Big 12?
Please do.
This is Utah's 7th conference that the Utes have played in their history. In order, the Rocky Mountain Conference, the Big 7, which was a conference they were in from 1938 to 1947. And when I read that, I was like, why would you have a conference named the Big Something? That's weird. That's a weird name for a conference. And I was like, we still do that. The Skyline, the Western Athletic Conference, the WAC, the Mountain West, the Pac-12, and now the Big 12. So they've been pretty good in a lot of different places. So yeah, we think this gets out of hand to a pretty big degree. We'll jump to Friday now. It's Florida Atlantic at Michigan State. Year 2 of Tom Herman at Florida Atlantic, one-time Houston coach, one-time Texas coach. Jonathan Smith, opening game for him with the Spartans. He brought 6 assistants from Oregon State. He brought his tight end from Oregon State. He brought his quarterback from Oregon State. 61 new players overall for Michigan State. That's the 7th most in the country and the 2nd most in the North behind Colorado. So this is a completely revamped roster, 28 transfers. I'm curious to see what the Spartans look like, Bill.
Yeah, as am I. And that many new players, I think you worry a little bit, right, about just how much have they gelled in the offseason. So I could see it maybe being a little slow out of the gate for Michigan State. They're not like an overwhelming favorite in this game.
No, 2 touchdowns. That's it.
Two touchdowns. Florida Atlantic is picked to finish about in the middle of the American Athletic Conference. Like it's a decent team. With potentially like probably like a top like 45, 50-ish defense in the country. So it'll be a good test for Aiden Childs, I think, in his first game. And he's been out there, puffing his chest out, saying, take me over. We'll see what that offense looks like. I do think Michigan State does end up winning this game somewhat comfortably, but I could see it being more of a situation where maybe it's even like close or tied at halftime and Michigan State pulls away. But I have 35-20 Spartans.
I have 40-20 Michigan State. I do think if Florida Atlantic, it's in year 2 of Herman. They were 4-8 last year. It's not like a jump year for them. It feels like they're still rebuilding. If this was looked at like, hey, it's a jump year in year 2, I almost think Michigan State would be on alert here. I don't think that's what it is. The over-under is 45 that Aiden Childs told people to take the over. So we both are over. We're listening to Aiden Childs.
I will listen to Aiden Childs until I have a reason not to.
Yeah. All right. Second Friday game, Bill, is what?
It is Western Michigan at Wisconsin. Western Michigan picked to finish 7th in the MAC. I think Western Michigan, a team perhaps worth keeping an eye on in the MAC if things hit. So, which is, let's say, like, this is not necessarily a MAC pushover coming into Camp Randall on Friday night. I think, like, not a test for Wisconsin, but like, a game that maybe can tell you a little bit. And for me, like all I want to know about is what this offense is going to be this year. Like they had grand designs with Phil Longo coming in last year that I think never quite came to fruition, and they need to start showing some progress there with Tyler Van Dyke at quarterback. So I think we will see some. I don't think Western Michigan is built to score much against Wisconsin's defense. So I just think on that side of the ball, it's like Wisconsin kind of sits on Western Michigan, and then it's a matter of what Wisconsin's offense can muster.
This is about 3 touchdown spread in this one. 16-0 in night games at Camp Randall for Wisconsin versus unranked teams. So I think they do handle business, and I do think they want to show that they are going to make a jump in year 2 of Luke Fickell, in year 2 of the Phil Longo offense. Interesting note in the Wisconsin game notes, Wisconsin has the most. We're done with the 10-team, the 4-team playoff era. 10 years of the 4-team playoff era. The team with the most wins in that era that never made the playoff is Wisconsin. So this is, which I don't know if that good, is that bad? Wisconsin 90, Oklahoma State 89, Penn State 88, Iowa 88, Utah 86.
They put that in their game notes?
They put that in their own game notes.
Interesting. Okay.
They also noted that Wisconsin currently has 22 straight winning seasons, which is the longest streak in the power conferences. So that's pretty good. That's longer than Ohio State and Bama, and this is the thing with like good but not quite good enough is again, that's like we're talking t-shirt slogans for Wisconsin. And so you want to acknowledge the good, but I think they want to get rid of the not quite good enough. I think they take care of business. I think they come out and really try to show something. So I'm at 41-14 on this. What'd you say you are?
I'm 38-10, kind of in a very similar area. I do think it ends up being a good display for Wisconsin's offense.
Okay, so those are our first 8 Northern games. Quick break. When we come back, big game breakdown, both sides of the ball. Penn State versus West Virginia. And then after we dig into that one, we'll run through all the other Northern games. If you are one of our fans, if you care about one of our teams, we're going to always give you something on this Thursday preview show. All of that next on Kings of the North. We are back on Kings of the North, Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Bill, I'm worried that people might be sick of us talking about West Virginia.
Probably. I'm ready to watch them play because I'm a little sick about talking about how good I think West Virginia is going to be.
Yeah. So this game is big noon, getting the Fox crew, Penn State at West Virginia in Morgantown on Saturday. I will be there for us. We are super intrigued by this. It is the only game of week one where we have 2 of our 28 Northern teams playing each other. So, of course, it's our big game breakdown. And we will start with the West Virginia offense versus the Penn State defense. This is the matchup that you dug into, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is one you did. I did the other one.
This is the one I did. Yeah, we're good. Yeah, we're good.
I mean, the idea that we would get to this point and be like, what? No, we both did the same side of the ball. Not impossible. Not impossible.
It will happen at some point this year.
It will happen. And we'll just have a super long breakdown of us saying the same thing.
Right.
Which is the new hallmark of this show. All right, let's start with that matchup. Garrett Green, Abdul Carter, Bill Landis, what you got?
Yeah, we're going to talk about Garrett Green and Abdul Carter. I want to start though with West Virginia running the ball in this game against Penn State's defense. Because I do think that is where it's going to be won or lost for West Virginia. As much as I love Garrett Green, I don't think Garrett Green is going to come into this game and like throw it 45 times and lead West Virginia to a victory through the air. Oh, but there are some things to attack. We will talk about it. But it's Penn State's interior defensive line for me against what I think is a good and perhaps even underrated going into this year West Virginia offensive line, because they did lose a couple of really good players. They have 3 starters back on the West Virginia offensive line, but they lost Zach Frazier, who was an excellent center. They lost Doug Nestor, who's a very good right tackle. So they're reworking the right side of the offensive line. And Penn State is coming into this game with a very veteran and kind of deep experienced group of defensive tackles. And I kind of think that's where the game is won or lost. If Penn State's defensive tackles can hold up against this West Virginia rushing attack, then I'm not really sure what West Virginia can do to kind of like scheme around that or find a way to win around that. And Penn State seems to feel pretty good about where its defensive tackles are coming into this year. A lot of talk about them being bigger. I think it's been a criticism. It's not a criticism because it's a stylistic choice. Like Penn State chose to have, I think, a little smaller, kind of more agile, like penetrating, slashing kind of defensive tackles rather than having like big burly guys who are going to like try to stand you up and almost kind of play like 2 gaps. I think they're going to try to find a balance between the two this year. And like to a man, all of their defensive tackles are bigger, even though they're like much older guys. These aren't like freshmen who have put on some weight after a year in college. Like these are all 4th, 5th, 6th year guys. Hakeem Beamon has gone from 290 to 296. Zane Durant has gone from 285 to 288. Devon J. Thomas has gone from 298 to 305. Keziah Izzard has gone from 295 to 305. And the biggest one, and maybe the most interesting one, is Alonzo Ford, who's a transfer from Old Dominion who didn't play last year because he got to Penn State and he got injured like kind of almost immediately. He was 298 on last year's roster. He's now listed as 319 pounds. Oh, that is a big old dude in the middle of Penn State's defensive line. And they just not have had a lot of guys like that in this program under James Franklin. So, but I really like West Virginia's offensive line. Wyatt Milam, Tomas Remak. Brandon Yates is a guy moving to center from guard. He's kind of played everywhere. I don't think that's a big transition for him. And then the two new guys on the right side are the ones to watch. DeQuay Hubbard at
Okay.
right guard, Nick Malone, who I think will start at right tackle. If those guys are ready and West Virginia can run the ball, then I think West Virginia can win. And like, I'm not trying to simplify it to just this one thing. And I'm sure you have some thoughts on how this might go too, but I just think it's that West Virginia ran for 146 yards on Penn State last year, which was a lot on Penn State's defense because it only gave up 100 yards, I think, one other game or two other games, excuse me, Michigan and Ole Miss in the bowl game. So like it was not a defense that got run on much, but West Virginia found some success last year despite losing. If they can find more, then West Virginia can win, I think.
And two good running backs. This is among the many teams in college football that have multiple good running backs. Like this is, you take your shot with these West Virginia running backs. Again, it is about the offensive line and the matchup up front, but
it's
they can probably do something, right? Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson. You feel decent about that.
You feel good about it. And Jaheim White didn't play in this game last year. He was a true freshman who just didn't play.
Okay.
And then became West Virginia's leading rusher for the rest of the season. He's a big play back. He can make guys miss in space. Penn State has very good linebackers and very good safeties. So like, I'm not saying it's going to be easy to make those guys miss in space, but it is an element of the offense that West Virginia didn't have in this game last year, was the kind of the big playability of Jaheim White. So he's maybe the X factor if you want to throw one out there on offense that's not Garrett Green. I think it's him because he's like the one thing in this game with teams playing each other in back-to-back years that Penn State hasn't seen yet.
I guess the one thing would be, say they can't run, especially inside. Do they have enough otherwise to just abandon that, move the pocket, throw, let Garrett Green run and scramble when stuff is not there, and maybe admit defeat on trying to move these big guys for Penn State, but find another way? Or do they have to have at least a minimum amount of success running the ball inside to open up the other stuff?
I think they have to have a minimum amount of success, unless Garrett Green has just made tremendous strides as a passer, like over in the middle of the field, which West Virginia practically avoided last year with him. It was just, we're gonna run the ball and we're gonna take shots is basically what the offense became. It was pretty good. But I think you need to run the ball to set up those shots, right? So if it becomes a drop back game, one, you have to deal with Abdul Carter and Dennis Sutton, Penn State's defensive ends, who are going to get after you, especially when you have a new right tackle. They're gonna make sure that you're secure there. And then two, like you're asking West Virginia's receiver corps to step up in a significant way, and I think that's a group with some guys who give you a little bit of hope. Like there's some younger guys there, some sophomores who I think people are hopeful will take a jump. But there's not like a ready-made household name. I know when I throw the ball to this guy, I don't care who's covering him, he's going to come down with it kind of receiver. I do think maybe, at least in this first game, you could get after Penn State's corners a little bit just because they're new. That's like the one part of the defense that is, it's not even necessarily an experience because they like Jalen Kimber from Florida as a transfer who has played some. Cam Miller has played a decent amount for Penn State, but like just kind of like playing together, I think matters. And really these guys haven't done that in the secondary. This is going to be the first time for the corners and the safeties to kind of try to figure out how they all play together. So there could be vulnerabilities there, but I just don't know if West Virginia is capable of attacking them unless it can run the ball. But I actually kind of think they will run the ball. I think the offensive line is
good enough.
And I think the presence of Jaheim White that West Virginia didn't have last year leads to some more rushing production than West Virginia had last year.
I mean, I think generally regarded as one of the better offensive lines in the Big 12. That seems to be the consensus, right? Around West Virginia, that this is definitely more of a strength.
Just replacing a couple guys, like, raising some question marks.
What do you think of Garrett Green in the run game? Is that a big factor to you or no?
Yeah, I think so. I think it helps you slow down Abdul Carter and deny Dennis Sutton, right? When you know that the quarterback can pull the ball at any time and run, and he can scramble, he can get you out of trouble too. So if the offensive line were to encounter any issues in the passing game, Garrett Green is athletic enough to kind of make you right either way. He's like, if you compare it to Penn State has a quarterback, like he's far more athletic than Drew Aller.
Right. Okay. So then what do you think of West Virginia throwing the ball?
I think they'll be okay. I like Cole Taylor. I like Cole Taylor, the tight end, kind of over the middle. Again, Penn State does have good safeties. assuming that's who's going to cover Cole Taylor the majority of the time. But I think they might be able to find a little something there. And then if like one other receiver steps up, I don't know, like Hudson Clement is a guy that played pretty well last year. The transfer from Oklahoma State, Jaden Bray, like might be the guy who kind of has to break out. He's like a bigger bodied receiver. I think maybe he could be a guy that you just sort of throw it up down the field and trust that he can go get it with a size advantage. So if they can have one of those receivers emerge as being even somewhat reliable, I think that combined with their run game can open some stuff up throwing the ball.
Does Garrett Green have to win this game for West Virginia? Is that how they win? Because they have a dynamic quarterback who made as many big time throws as anybody in the country last year, who is as dynamic running the ball as almost any quarterback around outside of Jalen Milroe. Like, is this a Garrett Green has to be the best player in the game, go get this thing? Or is there a way for the West Virginia offense to be like efficient and effective, even if Garrett Green doesn't look like a Heisman candidate?
No, I think Garrett Green probably has to win it, but I don't know that necessarily means with his arm. I think it just means sort of generally with his playmaking ability, scrambling, extending plays, turning broken plays into something, and then obviously in a designed run game. But yeah, I think he probably has to be West Virginia's best player for West Virginia to win.
Okay. Are you good? That's West Virginia offense versus Penn State defense. You're good with your breakdown? You feel you broke it down? Broke it down?
Yeah.
All right. Let's go to the other side of the ball. This is Penn State offense versus West Virginia defense. I will just say, I should have said this off the top. 61st time these two teams are playing, 49-9-2. Penn State has the edge. West Virginia's last win was in 1988. There are only two wins since the mid-50s, or 84 and 88. So Penn State has dominated this series. And it used to be a series they played every year, which is why this two-game home and home is awesome. Between, like, after the war ended, between 1947 and 1992, they played every year. This was like pre-Penn State in the Big Ten, and these are just like two Eastern powerhouses who, like, they played every year. And then they hadn't played since 92 until last year. So let's just be thankful as men of the North, people of the North, that, like, we're fired up that this is even happening, man. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're not giving up on the dream of making the Penn State West Virginia pit round robin happen every year.
Yeah. I really tried to get some traction with that. I don't know that anyone's buying it, but anyway, no, you've got to have these regional rivalries. All right, let's start with Penn State running the ball now. Just like West Virginia, two-headed backfield, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Nick Singleton, 752 rush yards last year, 97th in the nation. Katron Allen, 902 rush yards, 55th in the nation. The difference, Katron Allen, 5.2 yards per carry. Nick Singleton, 4.4 yards per carry. Sophomore slump. I think in his own head, maybe often, just one of those things that happens to great running backs who have awesome freshman seasons. And there is a lot of talk around Penn State about a bounce back season for Nick Singleton. And I think I would bet on that. Like, is that a reasonable bet to you that starting on Saturday, Nick Singleton looks like a guy who's going to average more than 4.4 yards per carry?
Yeah, I'd bet on that talent, and I'd bet on, I'm sure you're going to talk about the scheme that Andy Koltonicki will bring here that has yielded some pretty good rushing results at Kansas previously. I think those things combined bring out a better version of Nick Singleton. Yeah.
Offensive line. I think they feel pretty good about Drew Shelton at left tackle. Now, listen, they lost both their tackles and their center to the NFL, right? This is, again, just like Notre Dame, some other places, you have great offensive linemen, and then it's not easy to replace them sometimes. But Drew Shelton at left tackle, they really are talking up Nick Dawkins at center. They love him. Sal Wormley, experience at right guard. I think they feel really good about those guys. Cooper Cousins, as a true freshman, has been one of the sort of breakout freshmen of August camp. It feels like he maybe can help them. And then they've had a competition at right tackle between Nolan Rucci, the transfer from Wisconsin, and a redshirt freshman from last year named Anthony Donka. Penn State usually has, actually, that's not true. They've had some offensive line problems in the recent past. They got it kind of like 2 years ago. It was Olu Fashanu, and then like nobody else they could rely on. Last year, it felt like they kind of got it fixed a little bit. I think they'll be okay. and they might wind up being pretty good. Do you think that's a fair? Is that where you are with the Penn State offensive line? That I think, again, they really are talking up Nick Dawkins.
Yeah.
I think it'll work out.
I think long term it'll be good. Yeah. It's just when you're moving some guys around, when you're having like I like West Virginia because at least I know like the left side, Wyatt Milam and Tomas Rimac like have played next to each other for multiple years now, right? When Penn State has returning guys, but it's like a guy here, space, a guy here, like that just takes a little bit more time to gel, I think. So it makes me a little wary in an opener, but long term, I do like what they have up front, and they are in a much better place just program wise on the offensive line than they were 2-3 years ago.
Wild card is Bo Pribula in the run game as the second Penn State quarterback. I asked Bo Pribula about playing two quarterbacks at the same time when I went to Penn State for a day during the preseason. Like he really is an interesting dude, and Andy Kotelnicki seems like a creative dude. I'm curious to see what that looks like in place of Drew Aller at times, maybe with Drew Aller at times. And there's a part of me that Bo Pribula scoring the go-ahead touchdown in the fourth quarter on a kind of, maybe it's just you put him in and run Wildcat with the backup quarterback, but also like, I think he has a chance. It's a nice wrinkle. Like you've got to have a foundational run game, which I think they have with the two backs. It is, I think, one of the better wrinkles in the North to have Bo Pribula.
I agree. And I think Penn State is going to junk it up a little bit in this game. Like they're going to, I think they want to show right away that Andy Kotelnicki was the right hire for offensive coordinator, and that this offense is going in a more creative and explosive direction. So I'd be shocked if they just like keep it vanilla against West Virginia and like try to win on talent alone. I think Andy Kotelnicki will have some curveballs for West Virginia. The good thing for West Virginia is this will not be their first time facing an Andy Kotelnicki offense. This will be the third time that West Virginia's defensive coordinator has faced Andy Kotelnicki. So it's not totally foreign, but I'm sure he's got some tricks he hasn't shown yet.
And the bad news of that, so he was at Kansas. He was at Buffalo with Lance Leipold, came to Kansas with Lance Leipold. Kansas and West Virginia didn't play last year, but the last time West Virginia played an Andy Kotelnicki offense, Kansas won 55-42 in overtime. So
yeah, it was.
We know that almost, guy who dropped the bomb on us.
It was almost 7 yards per play and 49 points that Kansas's offense had in that game in 2022. Better in 2021 though. That was a pretty good West Virginia defense. Andy Kotelnicki's first year at Kansas. 6 yards per play and only 20 points and only 87 rushing yards against West Virginia. So they've had some success too.
Okay, show that film. Make sure they show that film this week. This guy's not a magician.
Yeah,
he might be a magician. You talk about the run game, like the Andy Kotelnicki run game scheme. You were like, I'm sure you'll get into Andy Kotelnicki's run game scheme, Doug. And I was like, I have Katron Allen stats. What do you think? What's he gonna bring? Maybe from that standpoint.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean like get intimately detailed with the scheme because I don't have that either.
Okay, good.
But I think I think like a lot of shifts, motions, misdirection. Like that's probably the shorthand of it. And frankly, just like a lot of stuff that Penn State wasn't doing and didn't have good designs on. I think it will involve certainly Bo Pribula using his legs when they do toss him out there as a wrinkle, but I think you'll see Drew Aller run more too. Drew Aller he's a pretty big burly dude. He can run through tackles. He can run people over. I said that Garrett Green is more athletic than Drew Aller. It doesn't mean that Drew Aller is unathletic. He can move a little bit. So, and I felt like at the end of last year, they were kind of letting Drew at least scramble a little more. But I think you'll see some more quarterback design run from Penn State than you've seen the last couple of years as well.
Yeah, they were talking about that in camp. Yeah. Like he knows that's going to be the deal. That they just want to keep. They just want to be more creative. James Franklin's whole thing was be more explosive, but I think creativity, just keep defenses on their heels. Like don't let them know what's coming, even if you think you can still do it when they do know what's coming. Passing the ball. This is the real question. Again, James Franklin said, I want to hire a new offensive coordinator, and he has to be able to bring explosive plays, and I want facts. And so they've been explosive at Kansas with Andy Kotelnicki. I don't exactly know how they got some of these stats, but this is from the Penn State notes. Kansas with Kotelnicki, the last 3 years, they're 10th in the nation of pass plays of 15 yards or more. That's pretty good. Here's another part of it, though. They're explosive throwing it. Penn State stats say Andy Koltelnicki the last 9 years, so that's at Kansas and Buffalo, has the lowest sack percentage in the nation. So they're able to be explosive, but also protect and get the ball out of the quarterback's hands, which is an interesting combination. And so I don't know. They've got to be explosive, but I think for them to be explosive throwing the ball, it's going to require Andy Koltelnicki scheming guys open, because I still don't know that they have the talent at receiver. Trey Wallace, I think, has been good in camp. People are excited about him. Julian Fleming, the transfer from Ohio State, and then Liam Clifford, Sean's brother, former Penn State quarterback. Those are the top three. Keandre Lambert-Smith and Dante Cephas both transferred after last year. They were the two leading receivers last year. I'm not sure that Penn State was super upset about those guys leaving, but there's still a lot of questions there. Good at tight end with Tyler Warren, good in the backfield. I think they'll throw it to the backs, especially Nick Singleton, but still legitimate questions about Penn State's receivers. And that's what we're going to, I think that might come down. That might be the story of the game of can these guys make some plays, or is Koltelnicki just going to have them 5 yards open?
Yeah, I think it will require scheme to get them open. Even again, like West Virginia's secondary, especially a corner, is a little revamped, but it seems like people in Morgantown are like, no, these guys will be better than you think. Like, it's new, but like, don't be surprised if the defense is better than you think it's going to be.
Yeah,
I think they're pretty good in the front seven. And a decent amount of that is back, and they can get after it a little bit up front. So it'll be a good test for Penn State's offensive line. But I just have a hard time believing in Penn State's ability, or Penn State's receivers' ability, to go make plays until I see it. And maybe they will. Maybe it's Trey Wallace finally making that jump. James Franklin this week was talking up Amari Evans a little bit.
Yeah.
I think mostly because he forgot to mention his name last week when he got asked about receivers, but like, he went out of his way to talk about Amari Evans. So I don't know. Like, I don't think Julian Fleming is like the game breaker who's going to come save Penn State's passing attack. I think it's a nice piece to add to the mix, but I actually think this maybe is where it could potentially get away from Penn State. It's just like they don't have the horses at receiver to throw the ball they need to throw it, or make the big plays the way they need to make the big plays to win a game like this on the road.
Rebuilt secondary for West Virginia. They do have Aubrey Burks and Anthony Wilson back as starting safeties. Josiah Jackson redshirted last year, so he's a redshirt freshman. I think opened some eyes in camp, has a chance to be a playmaker at the other safety spot. Watch for him on Saturday, Josiah Jackson. And at corner, again, like, rebuild it in the transfer portal. I think they have 4 different corners who were transfers. Feels like it's Aiden Gardens from Duquesne and Garnett Hollis from Northwestern, maybe back there. And so, but they had they had Beanie Bishop come in as a transfer and play really good for them in the past. So, when we had on our guy Jeremy Phoenix to talk about this, I said, hey, like, feels like West Virginia's had some luck in the transfer portal with secondary guys. He's like, well, we brought guys in. They haven't always been, but they at least addressed it. They knew they were losing guys, and I think at least they went after it in the portal at corner. And I think it has a chance to be good enough. I don't think these are all American guys, but Garnes especially, I think they have a chance to be decent in the secondary.
Yeah, and I think, like, when you go get, like, from Northwestern, especially, like, you get 2 guys from Northwestern are playing your secondary. Like, those guys know good defensive football, right? I would have the same concerns about that secondary that I have about Penn State's, which just, this is like the first time some guys are playing together. Although I guess it helps to have 2 former Northwestern teammates playing together. So maybe I believe, I don't know. Penn State's always good in the secondary, kind of regardless. So I believe in Penn State's secondary more than I do West Virginia's. But I could see West Virginia's defense, kind of showing up and being ready for this. I guess the one thing that is in my head as I was looking back at last year's game, Drew Aller threw for 325 and 3 touchdowns last year. It was his only game over 300 yards. It was one of 2 games where he had more than 8 yards per attempt. Now, a chunk of that was like a 75-yard completion to Keandre Lambert-Smith, where it's like a slant and a guy missed an arm tackle and there was nobody else there. So it's not like he was slicing and dicing them, but it was by far the best passing production Drew Aller had in a game last year was against West Virginia, and it was his first start.
That game last year was like, oh man, here we come. This Penn State offense, Drew Aller, here we come. And then I think the rest of the year, Penn State was like, let's look for that version of our offense in our passing game. And it was never really there. Up front for West Virginia, Sean Martin. They have both defensive ends back. Sean Martin's a really experienced guy. They did have 84 tackles for loss and 33 sacks last year,
Yeah.
which is pretty good. Like, they get after you a little bit. But the two guys, I should have mentioned this in the run game, they feel like they've said this in camp. They think their linebacker room is the deepest it's been in the Neil Brown era. They have 5 guys they think they believe in. Ben Cutter and Caden Beiser back from last year. Reed Carrico, the transfer from Ohio State. But the 2 guys I think to really watch are Trey Lathan, who was the starting middle linebacker last year and got hurt, was out for the season about middle of the year, and Josiah Trotter, who's of the Trotter family from Philadelphia. His dad played for the Eagles. His brother played for Clemson. He was hurt all last year as a true freshman. He got hurt in spring and didn't play. So they have these 2 young linebackers, a third-year linebacker and a second-year linebacker, who I think have great potential and have not really played. And I think a big chunk of this is sort of their ability to track down these Penn State running backs. And if Lathan and maybe Garrett Green has to win the game on offense for West Virginia, I think Lathan and Trotter have to win the game on defense for West Virginia. And it's young talent. I kind of like their potential to maybe do that.
Yeah, I do too. And I think like that both those guys not playing last year, like kind of force guys into different roles last season that have now like fortified the depth, I think this year, like behind Lathan and Trotter, right? So it's a interesting group. I think a group with a decent amount of upside. But yeah, I think I'm with you in terms of West Virginia's defense and what would need to help them spring the upside. I do think it is the linebacker play. Mostly against the run, like maybe occasionally trying to cover Ty Warren, the Penn State tight end. But I think it's almost exclusively about how those guys handle what Andy Koltonicki will throw at them, which I think is going to be like a kitchen sink kind of game. Like, here's everything I got in my bag because we're going to come out and try to win this thing. So, but I was looking up some stuff on Penn State's defense last year, and they were number 1 in the country in front seven havoc rate, which I think anybody who watched Penn State would be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. They were really getting after it. But I just scrolled down a little bit, and West Virginia was 24th.
Okay.
This is a good defense, good defensive front, I think, for West Virginia.
Yeah, I mean it's. I think it's a good matchup. They're enough similar in a lot of ways. Penn State's defense is better. West Virginia's quarterback is maybe a little more high ceiling, right? I mean, but they're pretty similar in a lot of ways. And will the West Virginia defense be good enough? And also, I mean, is it just Neil Brown versus James Franklin? These are 2 interesting coaches who have been around. I'm not sure either fan base has been in love with their head coach all along. James Franklin, 14th year as a head coach, 11th year at Penn State. He's 12-26 against ranked teams. This is not, West Virginia is not ranked, but I think they're good. They're talented. I think it's a relevant stat. It's like, how does James Franklin fare when the opponent is good? This is huge for James Franklin, is it not?
It's huge it's huge like as a tone setter for the season. But if you want to think long term, we did our playoff conversation yesterday. This game, Penn State, I think, has to win, like to feel comfortable about its playoff potential. Because if you're talking, if you think Penn State's not going to beat Ohio State, and then you're talking about taking a second loss anywhere on that schedule, right? It's not a cut and dry playoff resume in my mind. So like if you win this, I think you're kind of sitting pretty. As long as you handle your business the rest of the season, but it's a pretty massive game in terms of playoff implications in week 1, I think.
Neil Brown, 10th year as a head coach, 6th year at West Virginia. I was definitely on the hot seat going into last year. 4-14 versus ranked teams. I do think even the most optimistic West Virginia fans are like, well, I mean, they were West Virginia was 9-4 last year, but were there a ton of ranked wins in there? Like, are they able to handle a game like this? Neil Brown is playing the card again, though. He played it last year when West Virginia was picked last in the Big 12, and now they're picked middle of the pack in the Big 12, and he still doesn't think that's good enough. I do think West Virginia is going to be fired up at home. It's probably going to rain. It's going to be hot and rainy. It's going to be weird. It's going to be like a rainforest. It's a high of 88 projected for Morgantown. And it's like a 40% chance of rain, but it's like a 60% chance of rain, I guess, like right at noon when they kick off. I don't know who it helps. It doesn't hurt West Virginia because both teams probably want to run the ball. And it's like, if it's whatever, if it's rainy, it's like Garrett Green, he'll run 25 times. So I'm not sure that the weather plays a huge factor either way, and I'm not sure that either James Franklin or Neil Brown is going to be the reason their team wins, but I do think like somebody might have to make a gutsy call. Like, are you willing to roll the dice a little bit? Are these guys going to go for it on 4th down at midfield when it matters? Because you can't play scared in a game like this, man.
You can't. And I don't know if with that in mind, I don't know which coach I'd favor. I guess I'd probably favor Neil Brown, given some of James Franklin's game management mistakes in the past. And this is a game like for Neil Brown. Like if Neil Brown wins this game, it could be a little bit of rocket fuel for his program at West Virginia.
Yeah.
Just like a lot of proof of concept in one game, I think, for what he's trying to build there moving forward.
Yeah. All right. So what are we picking? Bill, who you got in West Virginia, Penn State?
I've been talking up West Virginia too long to back off of it now. I got West Virginia winning. I'm 31-30, which like I did not look at the weather. If I had looked at the weather, I might be a little lower, given what you just laid out. But I have West Virginia winning a very tight game, probably winning it late. And yeah, it's gonna be a banger. Maybe not so high scoring, but like I think like a really like physical, like let's get after it kind of week 1 banger.
Wow, a close West Virginia win. What an unusual pick.
Yeah.
23-21. I've got West Virginia as well. I'm super excited to go to this game. I have never been to Morgantown before. We hope to bring you guys some content from this game on social media, on our Instagram at KOTNCFB, on Twitter at KOTNCFB. May work a little bit of it into the post-game show that we do on Saturday night live from 11 p.m. until midnight. My plan is to get up, leave my house in Central Ohio at 6 a.m., hopefully get to West Virginia around 9:30, talk to people in the parking lot, watch the game, cover the game, get in the car, drive home, and make sure that I'm back for the post-game show at 11. Do you think I can do it?
I don't know. The weather's making me nervous now.
Yeah, I know. I might have to do the post-game show from the side of the road somewhere. But we are both picking West Virginia, and not a ton of people are picking West Virginia in this game. I will say this. My theory of the case is Penn State loses this game and makes the playoff anyway. And my theory of the case is West Virginia wins this game and barely misses the playoff anyway. So this is one of those, if you want to live in the week 1 games should determine a team's entire season, then you don't like my picks because I have the loser making the playoff and the winner not making the playoff. But it's still a banger. Both teams really want to win. Both fan bases are super jacked and really want to win. And Penn State fans are close enough to be able to drive to this game. This is great college football. It's just not punitive. Just let them play, and nobody's going to be done after this game. But your point that Penn State's playoff case is greatly helped by winning this one is exactly right. And the Big 12 as a whole, and others have made this point, like the Big 12 needs to win games like this. Because if you say, hey, the Big 12's 3rd or 4th best team beat the Big 10's 2nd or 3rd best team, like that's really good for the Big 12 when the Big 12 is trying to get 2 teams in the playoffs. So there are playoff implications galore, even if the loser's not knocked out and the winner's not guaranteed anything.
And I can't, I'm very possibly forgetting something, but there aren't a lot of that I can recall, like Big 12 versus Power 5, other Power 4 conference, non-conference games of note, right? Like it's this one, like Iowa State, Iowa, and Colorado, Nebraska.
Like the weird thing happened, both Kansas State and Utah had non-conference games scheduled that became conference games. So Kansas State is playing Arizona. That's a non-conference game. And Utah is playing Baylor. And that's a non-conference game, even though they're all now in the Big 12 together. So that means, you know, that like when Utah was playing Florida in the past, like Baylor's their team now, except they're in this. So it's weird. So yes, you are correct. Those are the 2 Big 12 preseason favorites.
Right. And
their big non-conference game is against a team that is now in their conference, but it's not counting as a conference game. So this is the best chance for the Big 12 out in the world to show what it can do.
It is. And I think they're going to do it.
All right. When we come back, we'll see how many more games do Bill and I pick exactly the same. 19 more picks ahead, plus our fantasy picks. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. Back on Kings of the North, Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Next game up, we're now moving to the Saturday games, is Illinois State at Iowa. Bill, what you got?
I got Iowa playing its first game since 1998 without Kirk Ferentz on the sideline. Kirk Ferentz suspended for this game. Seth Wallace will be the interim head coach, I guess, for this particular game. Illinois State, a ranked team in the FCS coaches poll, number 25 after going 6-5 last year. It's an FCS team that has a couple of FBS down transfers, which I always think is interesting. It's got a decent amount back on defense, and I think normally, Iowa coming into the season into this game is about I think it was 4 touchdowns the last time I saw it, favorite. With its head coach, you feel pretty good about it. Without Kirk Ferentz and a decent FCS team, maybe a little bumpy for Iowa. I don't know. What do you think?
I think Iowa's just in a super goofy spot to start the season. They also have Caleb Brown, who's one of their best receivers suspended for this game for an offseason DUI. So no coach, no receiver. Cade McNamara is back. Quote, my leg is not injured. So he tore his ACL the last game of September a year ago. So this is 11 months. He says he's good. There's no injury. There's nothing. This is the best my body has felt, and I'm fully confident in that. But it wasn't that good before he got hurt last year. In the 4 games before Cade McNamara got hurt, he was 43 of 85 and was averaging 115 passing yards a game in 4 full games. So they've gone from Brian Ferentz to Tim Lester. That's an upgrade. Cade McNamara is an upgrade over Deacon Hill, who had to play last year when Cade McNamara was hurt. And this is like, now that I'm talking to myself, I'm talking to the Doug who's been high on Iowa all offseason. It's just a goofy spot, Landis. Like, I'm not thinking Iowa's going to lose, but it feels like a super goofy spot to me.
Yeah, I don't think Iowa's going to lose either. You can see our scores here on the screen. I have Iowa winning 24-0. I just think if you were like, okay, Brian Ferentz is gone, here comes Tim Lester, Iowa's going to open it up a little bit and like show us they're going to have a little bit more of a punch to them on offense in their first game, and now all of a sudden they're trying to do it without Kirk Ferentz. I would just pull back on that a little bit. So I have like a typical Iowa 24-0 with probably a defensive touchdown, let's sit on this team kind of win. Yeah.
And we're not really talking about making bets here, but this is a 22.5 point line. I'm not sure Iowa's going to score 22.5. So I have 24-7, and it's the 5th game where we at least have one of the scores the same. I think this is them just trying to survive and just get to the Cyhawk game in week 2, and Kirk Ferentz will be back. Kirk Ferentz, what he'll do this week, I'll do what I always do through Friday night. I'll go to the snack. We tell them a little bedtime story before they go to bed and have a snack. I'll be there for that. It's business as normal for me. So that's the deal. And he was talking about how he said last year I heard about rallying cries and stuff like that. I made it so like it was like with Brian on the hot seat, it was like, let's do it. And so like he kind of doesn't want rallying cries right now, but he's also saying it was like a recruiting thing with Cade McNamara. He said, I made a mistake. I've owned it. I stepped on the line. I think the line was a little bit cloudy, a little bit blurry, but nonetheless, I stepped on it. It is what it is. So he's taken the 1 game in suspension, self-imposed. But I just think Iowa's going to be happy to win 6-3 again. But it's not indicative of what they're going to be. It may look like Brian Ferentz is actually still there, but it's just a goofy spot.
But it's okay. The bad man's gone. Yeah.
UConn at Maryland is our next game. This is Maryland favored by about 20. They have picked a quarterback, but not revealed it. It's between Billy Edwards, Cam Edge, and MJ Morris. We assume it's Billy Edwards, right?
That is my assumption. Yeah.
And the quarterback for UConn is Nick Evers.
Yeah.
Formerly of Oklahoma, formerly of Wisconsin, who once upon a time was like a big-time recruit. Maryland kind of replacing a lot. 7 starters back on defense, 5 back on offense. I think the defense has a chance to be pretty decent. Over the last 5 years, they've allowed fewer points per game every year, from 34.7 to 32 to 30.7 to 23.2 to 22.5. 40th in the nation last year. It's a pretty solid defense. Our guy, Ruben Hippolyte at linebacker, helping to lead that defense. I am just still generally down on Maryland for this year, but I think they are fine for week 1.
I'm not down on the Maryland defense. I like Brian Williams done a nice job there, the defensive coordinator. They look like a Big Ten team up front. now. They kind of always were able to get secondary skill, and I think they're blending that together in a way that is sustainable. I just don't know what they're going to be on offense. I don't know that matters all that much in this game, what they're
Yeah.
going to be on offense. Mike Loxley wants them to be a more physical, run the ball kind of team. I think they can do that just fine against UConn. We'll see if it has legs for the course of the season. I don't think they're going to be able to throw the ball particularly well. But like Billy Edwards can run, and he's physical, he's a big dude, right? Like I think you get him involved in the run game. I like the running backs. So I just think that's what this is. I think they run the ball, they play good defense, and they win. I have 31-7 Maryland.
And I have 26-13 for the Terps.
Yeah.
All right. Next one is Indiana State at Purdue, Landis.
Yeah, Indiana State at Purdue. These teams played in 2022, so a couple years ago. 56-0 win for Purdue. Obviously, that predates Ryan Walters, but 56-0 is nothing to sneeze at. I don't find it to be a particularly compelling matchup. I think actually what is most interesting here is because there's two things at play. I think Purdue certainly wants to put last year behind it, show that it is taking a step forward this year, but also it doesn't have to do a whole lot to beat Indiana State, and they are in an interesting schedule position where they play this opener, they are off the following week, and then they host Notre Dame. So if you're Purdue, what do you want to show in this game?
You're loading up for the Irish, swinging for the fences.
Of course, you're Purdue. You have to take your swing, right? I'm not saying Purdue's going to beat Notre Dame, but they're going to give themselves the chance to put their best foot forward, I think, by playing this one pretty close to the vest. So, like, they're a 37, I think, 38-point kind of favorite in this game. I don't know that they totally run away with it in a similar fashion to 56-0. And I could, like, see a second half maybe where they're up big enough where they're just kind of content running the clock out and getting ready for the Irish in 2 weeks.
I think Purdue's going to be better than people think. They were picked last in the Big Ten in our preseason KOTN poll. Indiana State was 10th out of 11 teams in the Missouri Valley in the FCS in their preseason poll, so they're not very good. Purdue's got new jerseys. They sold out their 42,000 seat season ticket allotment. They are Florida and Purdue are the only two teams in the country that have on their schedule 4 teams from the AP preseason top 10. They have Ohio State, Oregon, Notre Dame, and Penn State. 3 of those 4 games at home, which is why they sold all the tickets. Like, it's a great time to be a Purdue fan. And I do think I agree with the vanilla, but I also think they're just going to look better than you think. 2 guys to watch. 2 true freshmen. First team on the depth chart. Shamar Brigby at receiver. Watch for him. But the guy to really watch for, Terrian Grant, a major get for them in January as a recruit, reclassified, got there in the summer, won a starting cornerback job in camp. Watch this dude, Landis.
Yeah, I remember at the time we were talking a lot about that because they obviously they were reworking corner. They bought some transfers in. They had the kid from Georgia who came in. So not surprising because honestly, that's a situation like you're Purdue. If that's close, like play the young guy, right? Like build around this guy. Not to say that he didn't earn it, but like that is now like cornerstone piece of your defense for 3 years.
Okay. We are moving on to Kent State at Pitt as Mike Urostowski just gave us a little tidbit. Apparently it's being reported by Pete Thamel of ESPN that Eli Holstein will start for Pitt on Saturday against Kent State at home. Pitt is minus 24. We're not shocked by this because it was like Nate Yarnell was the starter in the spring, and now all of a sudden Eli Holstein came back and like made that unclear, and they said they were going to play both. So I think they'll still play both, but I'm fired up for Eli Holstein, the transfer from Alabama.
This makes me feel
alive.
Maybe alive, but like better about like is Pat Narduzzi not the kind of guy who's just going to like play the older guy? Like this doesn't.
It's a new Pat Narduzzi. I've been telling you. It's
I know.
Changing his stripes. Let's go on the Narduzzi train.
But now I'm buying it a little bit because this is the guy that should be your quarterback. You
Absolutely.
go get Eli Holstein from Alabama, he should be your starting quarterback. I don't want to like. No offense to Nate Yarnell, like they said they're going to start Eli Holstein and play both. Like just play Eli Holstein. You don't need the shenanigans. Just play the guy.
You got to give it Nate Yarnell at least a series or 2, but like it might become apparent, right?
You hope it does.
Penn State, by the way, picked last in the MAC. So this is an opportunity, I think, for Pitt to really lay it on it here. It's the 4th time that Kent State is the opener for Pitt. Pitt has won 51-10, 30-7, and 43-3. Pat Narduzzi in season 10, he's the longest tenured Pitt coach since 1965. So like that's Johnny Majors in there, that's Jackie Sherrill in there, that's Dave Wanstad in there. Like Pat Narduzzi is like a Pitt icon, man. And he brought in a 31-year-old offensive coordinator from Western Carolina. So a lot of offensive line guys back. Again, I think Pitt has a chance to be better than people expect. I don't know that they're going to blow Penn State out of the water, but I think they'll handle the business. I have it 35. No, I have it 34-6. Pitt.
I have it. Yeah, I have Pitt winning 35-3, but I could see if Eli Holstein and Cade Bell like kind of get into a rhythm and things are rolling, I don't think they're going to stop.
Yeah.
Right.
This is Pitt minus 24. That feels low to me.
Yeah.
And again, like Kent State is just not a good team right now.
They're not. No, very much not. We'll go to the next one. Towson is coming to Cincinnati. Towson, again, another FCS opponent for one of our teams. Cincinnati last year played an FCS team in Eastern Kentucky, scored 63 points, and Emory Jones had 7 touchdowns. I think I don't have them scoring 63, but I think this is an opportunity for Brendan Sorsby, the new transfer quarterback from Indiana, and the Cincinnati offense to kind of just cut it loose and have some fun in their opener. And I don't really think there's much more to it than that. I don't think it's a tremendous test for Cincinnati to open the season, but there's nothing wrong with starting your season with a feel-good kind of game. So I have Cincinnati winning 45-10, but I can definitely see it getting more out of hand than that.
I have Cincinnati 51-14. Towson was picked 9th out of 16 teams in the Colonial Athletic Association. 26 transfers for Cincinnati, but they've got their entire offensive line back and a 1,000-yard rusher in Corey Kiner. And Brendan Sorsby is an athletic dude at quarterback too. Like I think they steamroll. Yeah. I think they steamroll. And again, this isn't a betting show. I think that 30.5 is light. That feels like an opportunity there too, that I think Cincinnati is going to pile up some points here. And this gets me excited for the week 2 matchup. We just did it back to back here. Pitt at Cincinnati, man. Brendan Sorsby and Eli Holstein. Let's go.
That's the one thing that was in my mind picking the Pitt score is like, do they not kind of let it all out of the bag because they're playing Cincinnati and then they play West Virginia?
Yeah, it gets real.
Yeah.
All right. Next one is Akron at Ohio State. This is Ohio State minus 49 in this game. Ohio State all-time 36-1 versus current MAC schools. Their only loss 12-6 to Akron in 1894. And I hope Akron's hanging that in the locker room this week, Landis.
Ryan Day was asked this week whether or not he spoke to his team about the time that Akron beat Ohio State 100 and whatever it was years ago. He said, no, I didn't bring that one up.
Yeah. Ohio State has a little bit of a history of starting slow. And I think the same thing's going to happen. 23-3 over Indiana in the opener last year. And then an FCS game last year, only 35-7 versus Youngstown State. 2022, the opener was Notre Dame's 21-10. 2022. 2021 is at Minnesota. We already talked about that with Minnesota. They were losing at the half. Like, I do not think this is fully formed, get after it, destroy, Akron picked 11th in the MAC. I have 45-0 for Ohio State, and I think it will be more methodical than electric. And so I think both the total and the 49 given up is a lot for Ohio State. I think it's just more taking care of business. And you and I have talked about like how good this Ohio State defense might be and some of the statistical things they might be after. I like the shutout. I don't think Ohio State's hanging 60.
I think Ohio State's defense is ready to roll. A lot of continuity there, a lot of experience, just less continuity on offense, new OC, new quarterback, 1 new offense or 2 new offensive line starters, young receivers. Like I don't know that it's going to be immediate fireworks. I think you might see a pretty explosive like second quarter out of Ohio State maybe, but Akron actually had like a top 40 defense last year, which is kind of surprising when you look back at it. They're not a good team. They were, like you said, they were picked 11th out of 12th in the MAC. I think they're like SP plus preseason. They're like 132 in the country. And this is a game in 2021. Ohio State won this game 59-7 with Kyle McCord starting as a true freshman quarterback. So they weren't exactly rocking and rolling in that game and still won 59-7. I have Ohio State winning 56-3. Shutout definitely on the table for Ohio State's defense. And I agree with you that maybe it's like a second and third quarter kind of explosive output for Ohio State's offense. Maybe not scoring on your first 6 drives kind of deal.
Okay. Next up, you got Florida International at Indiana, Landis.
We have the debut of Coach Siggs.
Yeah, baby. We got the flags back here, by the way. I put all the first-year head coaches at the North on the bottom row of my banners because shouting them out. Good luck to those new guys.
They get Florida International away from Pitbull Stadium, so they don't have to worry about going to the Pitbull Stadium for this game.
But doesn't Pitbull
it's in
Stadium
Bloomington.
kind of travel with you?
It
Pitbull
does.
Stadium in your heart.
Yeah, it does. It's a state of mind more than it is a brick and mortar building. Yeah,
I do not want to make fun of Florida International for that because it's genius. This game should be played in John Cougar Mellencamp Stadium, and it is not being played. It's being played in Memorial Stadium. So who are we really here to make fun of?
I think there is outside of Memorial Stadium like a John Cougar Mellencamp Grove or something like that, like a tailgating area that's named after John Mellencamp.
Yeah,
it's always fun. Yeah,
I don't mean to give any
Jack and Diane on a loop.
I don't mean to give anything away, but do you ever watch Claim to Fame? It's like the show with the worst two Jonas brothers, where the whole show is it's people who are related to famous people and they have to figure out who they're related to.
I know the show. I've never watched it though. Yeah.
John Mellencamp's kid is on it.
Oh, nice.
So yeah.
I
don't want to give anything away.
Does John Mellencamp's kid have a big cat in the middle of their name as well?
No.
Like
he should. Yeah.
Steve Leopard Mellencamp.
Steve Joey Panther Mellencamp. Yeah. Now that's a great game to play. Well, we should do that's like a name generator thing. What's your Mellencamp name? All right. So anyway, I don't want to take away from Coach Sig.
Yeah, it's okay. So this is a Florida International team that was picked to finish 8th out of 10 teams in Conference USA. Not particularly good. There's a bad defense coming in to a place where a coach has talked a big game. Curt Cignetti has.
Oh, yeah.
He's gonna want to back it up.
I agree.
So this is a pedal down, I think, kind of game for Indiana. If they get rolling, they'll put up 70 if you let them. I don't think it's going to quite get to that point, but I am excited to watch what this Indiana defense is now and get a glimpse of what it could become with Curtis Rourke at quarterback, with I think some exciting receivers, transfers, and guys coming back. I think a pretty good offensive line, actually, like a sneaky good kind of offensive line at Indiana. So it's an offense that I could see like gelling into something fairly potent, at least for Indiana standards, by some point this season. I just don't know if they'll be there all the way in the first game. So I'm pulling back a little bit with a 31-17 win for Indiana, but they'll allow it to get ugly if you let them.
I have 31-13 Indiana. Again, Indiana is favored by about 3 touchdowns, 54 new players, 30 transfers, 13 of the transfers following Curt Cignetti from JMU. They have the 3rd fewest returning scholarship players in the country, the 4th youngest coaching staff in the country, 2nd youngest in the power conferences behind Georgia Tech, who sprung the big upset of week 0. So maybe young coaches are a good thing. Curt Cignetti, 119-35. That's the 4th highest FBS winning percentage among active coaches, where Ryan Day has 1 and Kirby Smart is 2. So like, guy knows how to win, brother.
He sure does. North Dakota.
North Dakota at Iowa State. This is not North Dakota State. This is North Dakota, who's good, but not quite as good. They're picked 5th in the Missouri Valley Conference in the FCS. North Dakota State picked 2nd in that conference. They were 7-5 last year. Iowa State favored by 4 touchdowns. Matt Campbell needs 4 wins to become the all-time winningest coach in Iowa State history. Again, I don't think he'll get all 4 in this game, but it's just to get to 57. Isn't that interesting? Like 57 wins would make you the all-time winningest coach in the history of Iowa State.
Yeah, and like his 9-win season is the best season in the history of Iowa State football. Yeah,
guy's a legend, man. We're watching the statue being built as we speak. 4 starters back on the offensive line for Iowa State. We like Iowa State. We had not talked about this a ton in the preseason. New offensive coordinator because the Rams took Nathan Scheelhaus. Tyler Mauser, he's 33. He's the 3rd youngest offensive coordinator in the power conferences. The youngest, that's Iowa State stat. Then I was like, well, I know who the 2 younger are, because they're our teams too. Zach Lujan at Northwestern's 29, Cade Bell at Pitt's 31. So this is the North going young at OC. Only 14 seniors for Iowa State. So it makes me think even like watch for Iowa State next year. But I like them taking care of business here, 41-12.
Yeah, I have 41-7. Matt Campbell was saying they came out of camp pretty healthy too. So like this is full bore Iowa State with a ton of continuity, some of the best returning production in the country, in a favorable matchup to start the season. I think they roll.
Okay. What's next?
UTEP is coming to Nebraska. The debut of Dylan
go.
Raiola with the Cornhuskers in Memorial Stadium on Saturday afternoon. Before we talk about Raiola, which I think is the big thing here, obviously, right? Tricky matchup perhaps for Nebraska's defense, not personnel wise, just like schematically. Like UTEP does some weird stuff. Scotty Waldron is the head coach at UTEP, was at Austin P before that. They get that
first year head coach. Yep.
Pace and space offense that last year, while Scotty Waldron was at Austin P, gave Tennessee some trouble last year. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. I think Nebraska's defense is very good. So I'm not like super worried about it, but maybe UTEP is able to hold the ball a little bit and move it some in a way that keeps Dylan Raiola and the offense from like really kind of exploding for something that is particularly noteworthy. But it's all about what we see from Dylan Raiola, right? Like that's all anyone is going to care about in this game.
Experienced offensive line for Nebraska. You know how many times Nebraska scored at least 21 points last year?
3 times.
3 times.
Yeah.
So like they want to see Dylan Raiola. They just want to see a little bit of offense, man.
More than 3 touchdowns, please. Yeah.
4 running backs in the mix. Matt Rule has not committed to one. He says they're going to play all of them. And it's like, I think they want to play multiple backs, but it's also like, someone show me you're a lead back. Watch that. 3 interesting receivers to watch. Jamal Banks, transfer from Wake Forest. Isaiah Nair, the guy that you love. We've talked about at Wyoming for 3 years, then at Texas for 2 years, and only played 1 game because he was hurt the whole time. Yep. And then Janiron Bonner was their fullback last year. Now he's their slot receiver. Team first guy. Those are like their 3 leading receivers. So it's a Wake guy, a Wyoming, Texas guy who's been hurt, and a fullback are the guys that Dylan Raiola is going to be throwing the ball to at receiver.
Yeah,
interesting.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Other thing to watch: Heinrich Harburg, the quarterback last year. He's going to play some non-quarterback. Landis. They're going to get him in the game because they think he's a good athlete, and he's maybe one of their best 11 at times. As
like a tight end or
he caught a pass he caught a pass in the opener last year, like at H back. I think like H back offset what's happening. Keep an eye on it is all. I think it's kind of you love that kind of stuff.
It's awesome. Yeah, I love doing that. Matt Rule thinking outside the box.
And guess what we did, Landis?
We had the same score.
Picked the exact same score.
Nice.
And it's a weird score, 38-13. How do we wind up at 38-13 for the UTEP-Nebraska game? I feel like we have to bet it. Exact score.
I guess we should.
Win like $1 million.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay.
All right, next game up is Ohio at Syracuse. Syracuse favored by about 17 points. Ohio picked 5th in the MAC. I just thought Q's looked really good in the spring. I'm fired up to see it. 4th meeting for Ohio and Syracuse. They played in 1919 and 1921, and then they played again in 2021, and they're playing this year. 59 new players for Syracuse. That's the 5th highest total in the power conferences. 9 starters back on offense, though, and 6 on defense. So a lot of guys who have played, but a lot of the guys behind them have changed. First game for Fran Brown. Let's get it.
Yeah, I'm actually a little surprised this spread is so close. The last I saw was 17-18 was Syracuse was favored by.
Yep.
Ohio has picked to finish 5th in the MAC, but this is not the same Ohio team from last year. They were a very good defensive team last year. They got kind of rated. They just lost. They lost a lot of guys on both sides of the ball. I don't think this offense is going to be even remotely good. So it's all about, I think, what Syracuse scores, and I think Syracuse is going to score more than 3 touchdowns in this game. With Kyle McCord and LaQuinn Allen and Yassine Willis and Aronde Gadsden, I think Syracuse has a nice debut here. I think they probably run it pretty well, and maybe just set up some play action stuff for Kyle McCord down the field. I don't think it's Kyle McCord shows up and goes 28-35 for 400 yards kind of deal, but I think Syracuse does a nice job of setting the tone for its season. Good defensive outing against an overmatched offense and an offense that I think brings a physicality that wins this game.
I have 37-14 Syracuse.
31-3 for me.
Next is Miami at Northwestern.
Miami, Ohio, the Redhawks coming to Northwestern, playing in the temporary stadium on the lake at Northwestern.
Yep.
This is a real game. This is
absolutely
Northwestern better be ready to go here.
It's favored by 3, the Wildcats at home, especially a toss-up.
Miami is the preseason favorite to win the MAC. They did lose some guys, but they still bring back a decent amount. I remember being very excited, I think back in January, after Miami had played in the MAC championship game, and all their players tweeted we're coming back with college football playoff logos.
We talked about it here. We were can Miami get in the playoff?
And then a couple of guys left. Not all of them left. They still have Brett Gabbert back at quarterback. I remember watching Brett Gabbert play quarterback for Miami in 2019, and he's still at Miami. Good team, like sound team. They're going to come ready to play. Northwestern has to respond in kind. I despite really having no idea what Northwestern might look like on offense, I am giving David Braun a little bit of benefit of the doubt here based off what he was able to do with this team last season. So I think Northwestern wins. I have 21-17, but this is going to be like a real upset spot, I think, to keep an eye on in the North this week.
I'll be curious to see. We've talked about the idea. Could this be like a kind of weird, funky home field advantage for Northwestern? But they haven't played in it either yet. I assume maybe they're out there practicing in it. I have 21-20 Northwestern. We don't know exactly what the quarterback situation is in Northwestern. It's either the transfer Mike Wright from Mississippi State and Vanderbilt, or it's Jack Lausch, who's been there. It's probably going to be Mike Wright. If it's Mike Wright, he might get a little loose with his legs. That guy can really run. And that could be a difference maker. In his career, he has 9 games of 50 rushing yards or more. So it doesn't have to be perfect. If Mike Wright just might break off 2 or 3 plays that are the difference in this game. So we both have Northwestern winning a tight one. Next up is UT Martin at Kansas State. I'm not sure there's a lot to learn here. UT Martin was picked to win the combo Big South Ohio Valley Conference. Both those teams got rated a couple years ago. So they basically said, we're not going to combine, but we're going to have like an association. So we're going to have like a combined conference. Anyway, they've never played, these two teams. The thing that I'm watching is Colin Klein, the former Kansas State quarterback, left. We talked about this, to be the offensive coordinator at Texas A&M. So the new offensive coordinator is their offensive line coach, Connor Riley. They were already 56% run last year at Kansas State. But, man, when you got a line coach calling the plays, Landis, sometimes you're going to run even more.
Yeah, and you have a quarterback who can run the rock too, right?
Yeah.
So I think that could be fun. Get a little triple option maybe at times if you want to out of the shotgun. Maybe I think they could be entertaining. This is, I think, a runaway spot for Kansas State. And I did see Chris Kleiman was asked this week, like, hey, you got Avery Johnson. He's making his first home start. You're going to try to like ease him into it, manage that a little bit. And Chris Kleiman was like, this kid's good. I'm not managing anything. So they're going to let Avery Johnson cook in this game, I think. I got Kansas State 48-10.
Then maybe that makes me think I'm a little low. I was going to say, again, like with Ohio State, maybe more methodical than electric. But if Chris Kleiman is like, let the kid cook mode, 35 might not be enough. So I'm at 35-0. By the way, Kansas State, preseason top 25 last year and this year, the first time that's happened in consecutive years since 03 and 04. So the Wildcats are up.
Yep.
Idaho at Oregon next.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of offenses cooking, we have Oregon against an FCS opponent. Idaho, not a bad team in the FCS, top 10 in the FCS coaches poll. Had a good defense last year. Don't think it'll matter. I think Oregon rolls here rather easily. I think Dylan Gabriel and Will Stein, the OC at Oregon, show that they're clicking quite early and they're throwing that thing around the yard. I think Oregon pours it on here early and often and runs away with a 63-3 win.
And I have 63-10. How we both won at 63, 81-7 over Portland State in their opener last year. Dan Lanning is not afraid to take it to somebody.
Yeah.
Tez Johnson, just note this. He's the guy I said could have 2,000 receiving yards. Last year, in his first 8 games, he averaged 52 receiving yards per game. And the last 6, he averaged 127 receiving yards per game. If he has 120 receiving yards per game times 15 games, that's 1,900. So, like, if you're on the 2,000-yard Tez Johnson tracker, it starts now in this one. And I'm not sure Dan Lanning's going to let up. The other interesting thing, this is Idaho at Oregon. Idaho State and Oregon State are also playing in week 1. Isn't that a fun little thing for those two states?
It is a fun little thing for those states, yeah.
Quite
good ball in Idaho.
Good ball. Fresno State at Michigan. This is a big one, NBC. Todd Blackledge, Iron Eagle, be calling this. Michigan 13-1 all-time versus the Mountain West. It's the first meeting between these two schools. I think this has a chance to be a bit of a game, and I think you do too. Michigan's favored by 3 touchdowns. I think right now, for this week only, Fresno State might have the better quarterback in this game, and Mikey Keene, who is the preseason first-team all-Mountain West quarterback. I have Fresno State as my Group of 5 playoff team. Last year, Mikey Keene threw for 366 in the opener, and they beat Purdue. He threw for 380 in their bowl game. I'm not saying he's going to throw for 366 against Michigan. I'm just saying Michigan is like figuring out quarterback, and Fresno State's like, we got it. We know exactly who our guy is. I backed off Fresno State a little bit because Jeff Tedford unfortunately had to retire like in July. And so Tim Skipper has taken over as the interim head coach, but they have 8 starters back on offense, including 4 guys on the offensive line. Great Michigan defense. I think Fresno State's going to score a little bit.
I actually don't think they're going to. Unless Wink Martindale, the new Michigan defensive coordinator, gets a little too blitz happy, which like is kind of his calling card. I think that's the interesting thing to monitor with Michigan this year is like Jesse Minter and Mike McDonald before him were very good about like disguising coverages and confusing quarterbacks without like being aggressive in a way that I think sacrificed just sort of like being sound. And I wonder if Wink Martindale might have a little more Don Brown to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, I could see maybe Fresno State hitting a big play or two that allows them to put some points on the board. But I think Michigan's defense is awesome. So I don't think Fresno State's going to move it all that much or score all that much. I have 28-10 Michigan, and I think that is Michigan running the ball, running the clock out, maybe having like 7-8 possessions in this game and scoring on 4 of them. And it looks a lot like what we saw from Michigan at the beginning of last year when they were just very content, kind of just sitting on the game. Because I don't know what to expect from them from quarterback. I think Alex Orji will start. Yeah. I think Davis Warren will probably play. I don't know what either one of them is going to bring to the table, but I feel fairly confident that Michigan can still run the ball.
I have Michigan 34-21, and I'll be watching. I'm just really curious. Jayshawn Barnum, the transfer from Maryland at linebacker, and Ernest Hausman, who transferred last year from Nebraska to Michigan, was a backup last year. Chance to be a really good linebacker pairing.
Yeah, definitely.
In the Big Ten this year. All right, next up.
Big one. Notre Dame going to College Station to play Texas A&M. That's a night game. It's going to be a crazy environment the Irish are walking into. And this is like we knew that Notre Dame was going to have a retooled offensive line coming into the season. Then they suffered an injury. Then they decided to just retool it even more than we thought they were going to. So they are going into this game on the road against a pretty good Texas A&M defensive front with 3 sophomores and 2 freshmen starting on the offensive line. There are 6 starts among the 5 guys who are going to start on the offensive line this year. Anthony Knapp, the left tackle, will be the 3rd true freshman to start a season opener on the offensive line for Notre Dame since 1972. They're taking a gamble here, bringing this line. They had more experienced guys they could have played. And I'm not saying it's wrong to bank on the talent and like play the guys you think are best because you're looking more bigger picture, long-term, entire season. I think that's probably the right course of action, but it could make this opener pretty difficult for Notre Dame against this Texas A&M front.
Also, new receivers that are going to play. Bo Collins, transfer from Clemson. Jaden Harrison, transfer from Marshall. Chris Mitchell, who's opened eyes in camp, transfer from Florida International. They do have Jaden Greathouse, who's been around. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price in the backfield. They can lean on them if the offensive line is good enough, and Riley Leonard might have to go win this thing. It is a tough spot. And some people really like Connor Wigman this year too for Texas A&M. You have bailed on the Irish, and I think you've made your case why. I still have Notre Dame winning this one 26-24. I do feel it feels like a 4th quarter game. But if this is an offensive line pick for you, basically, right? You just explained it.
Yeah, it's an offensive line pick for me. I have A&M winning 20-17. Very much like a defensive back and forth. I think it actually looks a lot like Notre Dame Ohio State looked last year when Ohio State went to South Bend. I think that was 17-14 or 17. I can't remember.
Something like that. Yeah,
something like that. I think this is like very similar vibes. I think both of these defenses get after because Notre Dame's defense is very good too. If Riley Leonard has a little magic in him, Notre Dame can win.
Yeah.
And he might.
And he might. You'll be watching. You gonna watch this one?
I will be watching this one. This will be the main screen, I think, with Michigan-Fresno as the secondary screen.
Yeah. That's a good northern primetime week 1 combo there.
Yeah,
I think people should be fired up for that. Yeah. Not as much for this one, although this is interesting. Southern Illinois at BYU. BYU's favored by 2 touchdowns. I think this has a chance to be a tough spot for BYU. I could not get all the way there, but Southern Illinois is picked 4th in the Missouri Valley. They're pretty good. They've never played before. BYU is 18-0 all time versus the FCS. Their average score has been 48-10. I don't think this is going to be that. The thing that backed me off Southern Illinois a little bit is, like BYU, they're kind of up in the air at the quarterback position. So I don't know. I think this could go either way. I gave it to BYU 27-24, but I would not be shocked if Southern Illinois wins this one.
I'm 24-17 BYU, but with a very similar thought process. I think this has a chance to get a little bumpy for Kalani Sitake and BYU. I think ultimately BYU's defensive line will probably be able to do enough, like Tyler Batty getting after it a little bit, right? Maybe, I think they want to be more disruptive up front. They've made some additions to do that. I think that will win them the game. But yeah, Southern Illinois is not a pushover FCS team in any regard. And BYU, I think part of the issue with me is like they've given off the impression that they don't know what they're doing at quarterback. Maybe they have a very clear idea of what they're doing at quarterback and they're just keeping it very close to the vest. And if that's the case, then they'll win. But if there's some quarterback shenanigans here for BYU, I think it'll be close.
Jake Retzlaff or Gary Bohannon. Retzlaff started the last 4 last year. Bohannon's a transfer. Bunch of wide receivers to choose from, some decent offensive line depth. So I think other pieces in place for BYU. And again, just for anyone who's not like super familiar with BYU, you know the deal. A lot of guys there go on missions. 55 of the guys on the roster have served on a mission. 27 married players on the team, and 13 of the current players, their dads played for BYU. So it's like they keep it in the family of BYU. Kind of cool. Average age of their roster is 21 and a half years old. So they're just older, but this is a tough spot. Not as tough for Washington.
No, they get Weber State at home. It's just a chance to see the new look Washington team, right? Like a totally revamped roster, new coaching staff. I don't have much of a vibe for what that's going to look like, but it's a good opportunity to start things out start a season that could get a little uncomfortable at times off on the right foot. Weber State is a team that's receiving votes in the FCS poll, but I don't think they're particularly dangerous in this matchup against Washington. I have Washington winning 42-7. I'm sure you have some numbers on just how new Washington's roster is going into this game.
2 starters back, 1 on each side of the ball. Have a chance to throw the ball in an interesting way, though. Jeremiah Hunter, the transfer from Cal, Giles Jackson, who's been around, and our young guy, Denzel Boston, who I think has a chance to be one of the breakout young guys.
That's your guy
in the North.
Yeah.
That's my guy. We had a good spring game. They have Jonah Coleman as a transfer who came with Jed Fish, was Arizona's leading rusher last year. Also Cam Davis in the backfield. Entire offensive staff came with Jed Fish from Arizona, plus 2 defensive coaches. I think the offense has a chance to hit the ground running. Yeah, with Will Rogers, the Mississippi State transfer who's been around. And I think they want to show that they're going to be better than people think. So I think Washington pours it on here a little bit. Weber State picked in the middle of the pack in the Big Sky. They're fine. I have 52-17 for Washington. And I think we could come away from this. Washington's fans were mad when the Huskies were picked 9th in the Big Ten. I think we could come away on Monday talking about, you know what? I actually think Washington has a chance to be better than we think. Like, watch out for these guys.
And you think if that's the case, it would be like receiver driven?
I think so. I think like Jed Fish and Brennan Carroll, like offensive acumen, receivers, and Will Rogers as a veteran QB who knows how to get the ball to his playmakers. The offensive line is a complete who knows what. Just as an example, Enoch Vamahi was a guy who at Ohio State could never get on the field. He transferred to Washington. He's going to start. So like that's what we're talking. It's just completely rebuilt from nothing. And so that's the big question. So Will Rogers is going to have to get the ball out, but he's old and has been around, and they know that, and they'll plan for it. So I think they have some skill guys if the offensive line doesn't get overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Last one is of our teams before we get to our group of 5 pick is Boston College at Florida State. This is Monday night. There's always a Labor Day night game in the ACC. Boston College is in at this time. They noted Bob Wischusen, Boston College grad, will be calling it with Louis Riddick on ESPN. I think Louis Riddick is really good. So this will be a fun game to watch. Last season opening win versus a ranked team for Boston College, 1976 when they beat Texas at home, which just takes us back to a time when Texas would go play an opener at Boston College. What can you imagine if Texas would go to Boston College now? That'd be awesome. Yeah. I think Boston College is going to get mad Florida State.
Yes. On the table, I think, right? Florida State with extra time to prepare, obviously lost in Ireland to Georgia Tech. Some stuff in that game, though, that I think leans into some strengths of Boston College, no?
They have 15 starters back, like the skill guys at receiver. I think they think their offensive line is pretty good. I think they think their defensive line is pretty good. Two backs who can run the ball, led by Kyle Robichaux, and then our guy Thomas Castellanos, who, if Haynes King can get some work done against Florida State, I think Thomas Castellanos can too.
Georgia Tech ran the ball on Florida State. This is a stat from David Hale. I think he's at ESPN that I saw. Yep. In that game, 18 of Georgia Tech's 25 first down plays against Florida State were designed runs that averaged 3.2 yards per carry before contact.
Wow.
Like, they were getting moved off the ball at times in that game. And I think Georgia Tech's offensive line is probably a little better than Boston College. Maybe not. But I like Boston College's offensive line. I like their running backs. They have a quarterback that can run. There's a recipe for Boston College. I'm in agreement. I'm in agreement with you that I think they're going to get angry Florida State, and that's going to matter tremendously. And Florida State is going to win the game. But don't forget, last year, Florida State was up 31-10 and then had a nail biter because Boston College came storming back, lost 31-29. Thomas Castellanos had a pretty good game, and that was I think a significantly better Florida State team.
Oh, significantly better,
than the one that Boston College is going to play this week. So I'm not all the way there on, like, watch out for this one, but there's a path, I think.
I'm all the way there on it'll be closer than the 17-point spread. So I've got Florida State. Actually, I'm not all the way there on that because I have Florida State winning by 18. I think it will be competitive for at least a while.
Yeah.
38-20 Florida State.
I'm 31-21. So, like, I have it pretty tight too.
And now we're down to our group of 5 pick. We're going to pick one northern group of 5 team each week and make a pick on this game. What are we doing this week?
We are doing Wyoming going on the road and playing at Arizona State. Arizona State, for some reason, is favored by a touchdown. I think most places I saw. Wyoming's better than Arizona State.
Let's go.
I just think Wyoming's better. Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State just has a heck of a job in front of him to try to make that program remotely competitive again. The fact that they won 3 games last year, I feel like, is a minor miracle. Wyoming's a tough team. They got a decent amount back. They got 4 starters in the offensive line back. They got a big old quarterback in Evan Swoboda, who they're going to run. They got a really good tight end in John Michael Gillenborg, who I think is one of the better tight ends in the country. Actually, I think he will become that over the course of this year. And I just think Wyoming's going to pound them. Like, I think they're better on both lines of scrimmage. New head coach for Wyoming, Jay Salvell. Yep. Taking over for Craig Bowl, former defensive coordinator. Craig Bowl retiring after last year. Jay Salvell, by the way, an Ohio guy, a Mount Union guy. He is of the North. I like Wyoming a lot, actually, this year. I kind of like Wyoming in the Mountain West as like a sneaky play counter to Boise State and Fresno State. But I think Wyoming starts its season off on a good foot here, beating a power conference team. I have Wyoming winning 28-24.
Arizona State, a touchdown favorite, but like you said, I'm not sure why. Wyoming's best running back is out, which I think might pull you back a little bit. It pulled me back. I couldn't get there. Arizona State, 23-16, but I will be happy to come on the show Monday and talk about how the Cowboys proved me wrong, man.
Go Pokes.
Let's go to our fantasy picks. We're going to do this every week. Doug versus Bill. Our rules are we're going to pick one northern quarterback and one northern skill player. And then Landis will track them in a fantasy football stats way. And we'll see who wins each week. And how we do, we get a track, we'll track total stats for the year, but also who wins the head-to-head battle every week. Does that seem fair?
We'll do we'll do weekly and keep in track it for the year. It'll just be standard fantasy scoring. Okay. Like, I haven't looked at it yet, honestly, but like whatever the standard Yahoo or ESPN fantasy scoring is. So like not PPR. And then like whatever standard scoring is from that. The hook is once we pick a guy, we can't pick him again the rest of the year.
Right. So we toyed with like we could take guys from each other, but it's just for ourselves. So it's like, when are you going to pick Dylan Gabriel? When are you going to pick Emeka Egbuka? Right. Like there's going to be strategy to that. So 14 weeks of the season, I'll go first. I'll tell you who my picks were because I'm not sure what I'm doing.
Okay.
And I did have some strategy to this. I'm taking Tyler Van Dyke from Wisconsin, who was a guy who would throw for 300 yards at Miami when he was at his best. And I just think that Wisconsin is going to be interested in coming out and throwing the ball and showing that Phil Longo's offense is ready to get after it in year 2. So he, a couple years ago, I think, had a hot start to the season. There was a part of me when we were talking about like Dylan Gabriel, like Oregon scored 81 in the opener last year. I was like, is this the week to play Dylan Gabriel? Should I play Dylan Gabriel? Because I think he might throw 7 touchdown passes in this game. Yeah. And there's a part of me that thinks I should have done that. But I thought this was a good spot to get like the best of the Wisconsin passing game. And then I'm playing our guy, Nate Carter from Michigan State at running back. In week 2 last year, he ran for 130 yards and 3 touchdowns against an overmatched opponent. And I think for Jonathan Smith and Aiden Childs, everything like easing into this new world, I think handing the ball to the guy who's been there makes a lot of sense to me in week 1. So I think Nate Carter is on track for like multiple touchdowns in a 100-yard game. And I think Tyler Van Dyke could throw for 303 scores. So Tyler Van Dyke of Wisconsin at quarterback, Nate Carter of Michigan State at running back.
Yeah, I think you're on to something about what to do at quarterback and picking a guy you know is awesome against a defense you know is overmatched makes sense. But I kind of lean more toward, I like this guy. He's going to have some tough matchups later on in the year. Let me take him now when I think he has a more favorable early season matchup. So I'm taking Curtis Rourke from Indiana against FIU's defense. I think they'll want to throw the ball around too. Kurt Cignetti and those receivers want to show that they are a program where high-level quarterbacks and receivers should come play. And I don't know how many opportunities throughout the year they're going to have to really lean into that. So I think they're going to lean into it against Florida International this week. And I see Curtis Rourke having a nice debut for the Hoosiers, couple touchdowns, 300 yards kind of game. And then I'm taking Travion Henderson, Ohio State's running back, because you get 2 cracks at Ohio State's backfield this year. I'm taking Travion against Akron because I think Ohio State might want to lean on him a little more in the opener as maybe like a tip of a cap to a guy who's a captain, who's had a really good offseason, who has handled the addition of a guy like Quinshon Judkins to this roster exceedingly well when I think a lot of players would not handle that well. Yep. So I think they're going to put the ball in his hands a decent amount. I still think long-term the Quinshon Judkins is Ohio State's leading rusher, but I think coming out of week 1, the guy that's going to have the bigger week is Travion Henderson.
This is your chance to play Trey, you're thinking. Yeah. I'm also thinking Will Rogers at Washington would have been a good play at quarterback this week, like based on what I just said. So we'll see. All right. So we'll track that. We'll track our picks through the season. Again, we're not picking against the spread. We did have I think 3 games where we picked opposite: Notre Dame-Texas A&M, North Dakota State, Colorado, and Wyoming, Arizona State. So we'll just figure out, and it'll get harder as we get into the year. It's not that hard to pick winners when it's a 30-point spread. But we'll do a version of this, pretty much this every week. We're going to get to the point where it's not 27 games, where it's 22 games or 17 games or 14 games, because our northern teams are playing each other or there are buys, so it won't be quite as hectic. And you'll notice we didn't talk Georgia Clemson, we didn't talk Florida Miami, we didn't talk LSU USC. It doesn't mean we aren't aware of those games and we're not going to watch those games, and we might talk about them on Monday when we do a version of this show reviewing everything.
Yep.
But we care about the North more. And if you really want Miami versus Florida analysis, there's a million places you can get it. You're not going to get it here. But I think we do a better job talking about Syracuse versus Ohio and Kansas State versus whoever they're playing, right? Then you'll we really up north. It's a lot of games. Like, that's why you're here. We have a better Indiana State versus Purdue breakdown than you're going to find most other places. So that's what we're going to hang our hat on.
It is. Yeah. And I don't know. I like talking about those games, right? Like I understand the games that draw the most eyeballs and stuff like that, but like, we want to make sure we're talking about everybody. And I think that I'm comfortable in that lane. I like being in that lane.
UT Martin at Kansas State. I just forgot for a second. All right. We will see you Saturday night live, 11 p.m., where we will talk about the most important and exciting things that happened during week 1. We will see you Friday morning with Tyler Shoemaker for our Bets of the North, where we're going to be making best bets with real money. And then we'll see you back here Monday at noon for a recap of the week that will be a similar vibe to this, where we're going to hit everybody, but also dig in on the stuff that is worth digging in on. Thanks as always to our producer, Mike Yarostowski, for making all this stuff happen for us. For now, we did it, Landis. We got through the first 4 shows. How you feeling?
I feel good. I'm excited for Saturday night.
Yeah, let's get the ball. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of the North.